probably heard this story before. Guy meets girl, they fall in love, they get married, they have kids, then a pretty little house and a picket fence. Or maybe you've heard the more modern version of that story. Person swipes right on other person. Then after years of a complicated, undefined relationship, they finally decide to foster a cat or a plant together. Possibly the least common version of this is person never meets other person face to face. Not until they fall in love and get engaged. Then 4 weeks after meeting for the first time in person, they stand in front of their closest friends and family and either get married or separate forever. This all in a bid to find out whether or not love is blind. I'm Ronald Young Jr. and I'm on the couch. Check. All right, this is Ronald, and I am on the couch after watching Love is Blind, the 3rd season. Love is blind. Love is Blind, created by Coelen, available on Netflix. For a full list of cast and participants, you can check the link in our show notes. Today's episode, we'll be talking a little bit about Love is Blind. We'll talk about season 3, but this episode that we just watched, if you're caught up with Love is Blind, is through episode 10 of the current season. So if you haven't watched yet, I'd encourage you to go ahead and watch it because I'm going to talk freely about it with spoilers up into this moment. However, there's going to be a second part of this episode, which will be a Patreon exclusive, which I'll talk through all of the rest of the proposals, all of the rest of the weddings, because through this episode, only one couple has had a conclusion, had a resolution, if you will. And that is SK and Raven, which we'll talk a little bit about today. So for those of you following along, you know what Love is Blind is. It is billed as an experiment to see if love truly is blind and if people can fall in love sight unseen and then get married based off of the connection that they made when they did not see each other. Now, the premise is it starts off a little kind of false right off the bat, because the whole idea is that these are people who are falling in love sight unseen, and then immediately after they fall in love, they have to get engaged and within 4 weeks get married, which is not how it works. Even when you don't, when you can see, like it's just not how it works unless you are in an arranged marriage, or if you have some sort of culture where, again, we're meeting someone and getting married, or if you're on that show Married at First Sight. It just in let's say American culture, and this is an American show, so in normal American culture, this is not how any of this actually works. So when they talk about this and this specific setting and saying, well, we're going to see if it works if it's blind, it's like, that's not the only variable that y'all are introducing in this. And every variable that they introduce is completely stressful. They take a bunch of people, they lock them all in one location together. They then have to go interact with each other through pods. And as they're interacting through the pods, they're also dating all from the same pool. So it's a bunch of people, it's a bunch of single people, but they're all dating each other. So your exes, all of them, they're all in the same pool. And eventually, and those of you that watch know eventually that some of these people run into each other again, so they can kind of rethink their decision as they're saying, oh no, you know what? Raven is totally my type, and she's really hot, and I chose Nancy. I'm talking about Bartiste, those of you that are following along. So This show, the reason why I watch this show is I watch a lot of dating shows. I watch The Bachelor. I used to watch Love Island. I don't watch it nearly as much anymore. I watch, of course, Bachelor in Paradise. I watch Love is Blind. I watch The Ultimatum. There's typically most dating shows that are out there. I'll try to give them a shot, at least, because they all have interesting premises. All of them try to be different, but they all boil down to the same thing, which is that they want people to watch them. They want to get eyes on them. They want to be titillating. They want to be exciting. They want to be compelling, and they want them to have drama. And I think the Bachelor is the oldest of all of these franchises. It's by far the most fake. It's come to the point where, and there's a podcast I listen to called Game of Roses, which if you're a Bachelor fan, you should make this your number one Bachelor companion podcast, because it really talks about the show in a very matter-of-fact way, and it calls whatever the thing is they're doing a game, and it alludes to the thing that they win as a prize rather than the prize being love, which is a false premise that most of these shows purport. It's really just a bunch of good-looking people getting together on television, and all of us kind of like watching it and, being involved in the drama and the gossip ourselves. But of all of these shows, you have The Bachelor, you have Love Island, there's so many others. I'm sure you guys are yelling them out right now. But the thing I like about Love is Blind is, while it is also ultimately not a very good method of finding a partner, it is probably the most realistic in terms of the way it's filmed, in terms of the ways in which people interact with one another, and in terms of the ways people think and reason when they're on this show. And that is to say that everyone on here seems to be more normal, more regular people. They're all extremely attractive people, but there's a lot of people, if you look at the Bachelor pool of contestants that are on there, I don't really see a lot of overlap between the Bachelor pool of contestants and the Love is Blind pool of contestants, because the Love is Blind pool of contestants seems like they're pulling them from the actual working force. These are real humans. If anyone watches Married at First Sight or 90 Day Fiancé, you just get the sense that these are real humans that you would spot out in the world. They would not, none of these people would have a job like influencer. You would find that on The Bachelor, people on the show called account executive, and really you just see them on Instagram just showing off their abs and laying around. Whereas because the people on Love is Blind seem like they come from a more real place, it feels easily relatable for all of us normies watching it. It feels almost attainable in a way, and we could kind of like understand the things that they're going through with one another. And the problems that they say are real problems. Like, watching Coelen and Matthew as they were interacting, there was a way in which Matthew was getting angry that all of us kind of looked at that, recognized, and said, oh, this boy, you might want to be careful with this guy. He seems like he might have some anger issues. And it's demonstrated in a way that does not feel far-fetched, even the way he's approaching it. We're looking at, we're like, oh, we've all seen that guy out in the world, so this looks pretty familiar. Or if you just talk again about like Bartise and Nancy, Bartise is I believe he's a fitness trainer, and he's like, really, I don't know. No, he's an accountant, but he's also very into his body, very into fitness. And he talks about that a lot, but he's also 25 and he talks like a 25-year-old. And those of you that watch the show know exactly what I mean when I say that. There's a self-assuredness that only comes with being 25. When you're 25 years old and you're just like, I already know. I don't need you to tell me. Nope, I already know. I've known this for a while. Y'all can't tell me nothing. And then you turn 26 and you're like, wait a minute. There's a lot I do not know. In fact, am I getting dumber? What's happening right now? I have not figured this out yet. Then you turn 30 and you're like, oh, snap. How are they letting me be an adult on my own? And there's a couple of 25-year-olds on the show that are acting kind of like that. Cole is another one. Cole is with Zaynab. Now, again, this is going to get a little insidery for people who don't watch the show, but I'll just tell you enough that if you're not watching and you're still listening, thank you for one. But if you're not watching and you're still listening, you should know enough to understand how this show works. So you have Cole, another 25-year-old who's with Zainab, who's in her 30s. Again, Bartise, who's 25, is with Nancy, who's in her 30s. And I feel like the theme of this season, specifically of season 3, and I think I've seen better match couples in seasons 1 and 2. And to be clear, all of the couples in season 2 have split. 2 of the couples from season 1 have stayed together. And there's on average about 4 or 5 couples a season that come out of the pods. So there's about 40 people that go into the pods, about 10 people that come out of the pods as couples. And then you follow those 5 until they get married. And then they say yes or no. And that's the end of the show. This season, I want to say, is probably the poorliest matched season I've ever seen by far. They are putting 25-year-old men with 30-year-old women, which is just, I mean, it's a bad idea. It is just a bad idea. And it's not just bad like on paper. I mean, on paper, we'd look at that and be like, this ain't it. But just looking at these folks interact is just, I'm looking at 30-year-old women who are self-assured, like boss women, have good control of their lives, know what they're doing, know where they're going. And I'm looking at them be like kind of, I think gaslit is overused, but definitely in some ways manipulated into thinking less of themselves because they're dealing with emotionally immature men. And there's something about the matching process that immediately makes me say, I don't think that this should be able to happen. Like, I feel like there should be something that says there's a question that's not being asked. There's something that's not happening in the pods that is actually making this experiment a little worse for me. Because I'm looking at people that like have no business, because you'll listen to one of the contestants, Nancy, say, oh, I would have never dated Bartise out there if I met him out there. I mean, he's 25, you know, we're very different. And then she's dating him, and all of those differences and issues are coming out in their relationship and in all the fights that they're having. And yet and still she's saying, oh, but I love him so much and we're going to be together and now we're going to get married, actually married. And this woman is a boss. She flips houses and, you know, has business dealings and is trying to be a mogul and is doing a pretty good job at it. And there's one issue in which Bartise comes in and says, oh, I didn't know you were still involved in one of this house flipping with your ex-boyfriend. And I'm like, yo, that's a business decision, homie. Like, maybe you don't know that at 25, but in your 30s, you're like, hey, yo, if we going in business together, that's different from our relationship. We got to keep that separate if we try to get this money, which is something that you would understand if you were a little bit older, perhaps. So there's a lot about the show that, like, in some cases, it's just you put these matches together and we kind of have to watch them struggle with stuff that we can see on the outside is definitely not going to work. We just kind of have to wait for them all to break up. Again, if you watch past seasons, we watched several couples in season 2 all break up. It's not necessarily something that's new to any of us to like see a poorly matched couple not work out. So this show kind of like harps on that premise a bit. And I think one of the things that's broken about dating television today is that in a lot of ways they adapt this all or nothing mentality and try to say, well, I mean, we expect at the end of the show for there to be an engagement. And I'm like, that's just not something we do in real life. So I don't understand why we think that there's something better about this well-produced process that all of a sudden makes it better or I don't know, easier, or for whatever reason, they think that this is a better way of people to fall in love and get married when all circumstances being great in real life there's still a lot of ways in which people are not meeting up with each other and getting together. So what about this sanitized process is making it any better? Spoiler alert, it's not. Which brings me to SK and Raven, 2 people who probably, again, poorly matched. There are 5 couples on this season. There are Alexa and Brennan. There are Matthew and Colleen. There's Nancy and Bartise. There is Zainab and Cole. And finally, SK and Raven. Now, of those 5 couples, the only one that I think it could probably have a fighting chance, and just because of the temperament of these 2 people and the fact that they're walking into the relationship, she asked for a prenup and he said yes, are Alexa and Brennan. There is a reality in the way that they're interacting with each other that makes me believe that even if it doesn't work out, they will have done it intentionally. It would have been something where it's been like, well, didn't work, see you never, you know what I mean? But there's something about the way that they interact with each other makes me think that this could possibly work out for them, even though likely it won't. Simply, I mean, granted, again, 2 couples from season 1 worked out, so there's no reason why another couple couldn't work out ever again. But I don't know in a lot of cases. Of those other remaining 4 couples that are on Love is Blind, 3 of them, I would say the women need to throw the man away. And the last one, the man needs to throw the woman away. And that's SK and Raven. They are the only couple in which we see them come to full resolution on episode 10, in which SK, who is going to grad school in California, and his plan is to go out there, finish his program. They didn't say what his program was. They didn't even say what school he's going to, but he got accepted to a prestigious program. People mentioned that it was good. And like he says, it's an opportunity for him to do better in life and to keep moving forward. So I imagine he's going to probably get an MBA or something cool out there at a great program in California. It might not even be an MBA. It might be technology based, something great out there in California. And his partner, Raven, who is most of what is talked about her on the show is her looks. And most of what she talks about herself is fitness, being in shape, her career as a Pilates instructor, all of that. So I don't want to get into talking about her looks as a character up to itself, but I will say that SK and Raven seem to be in different places in life when it comes to where their priorities are. And SK definitely seems like he wants to have a family. He is Nigerian. It's important. Family is important to him. Being together, working it out, all of that is important. And in a lot of ways, I'll give you one perfect example. We've got SK who's saying, I'm going off to school. And we have Raven who says, while you're in school, I expect that we'll both be paying my rent while you're away, knowing that he'll be in school. He will have to cut expenses. He will have to pay more money to be in school. Somebody's going to be a little broke. I mean, I don't know about y'all being a student, but somebody's going to be a little broke. So it already seemed like there were issues there to begin with. So I'm saying all that to say, when they get to the altar, they sang it all, the I love yous, all of that. And with great strain, SK says no to Raven. All of a sudden, this has become a recap show rather than a review show. And it's probably because I just watched the show. And with Love is Blind, there's more to recap than there is to review. Because to be honest, this is a 3-star show. There's nothing spectacular about the show. It might even be 3.25 stars. Because in terms of dating shows, it's easy to talk about because it brings up issues that a lot of us think about in relationships to begin with in a way that The Bachelor does not, that Love Island does not. Mostly because Love is Blind, it is in your hometown with other people who live in your hometown, and y'all live together for a period of time. Whereas most of these other shows are all set in suspended reality, where you're in a villa or you're in a mansion and you're spending a limited amount of time together. And then you have to go figure that out when they turn the cameras off. This is cameras on while you're at your house working from home. You know what I mean? There's a lot of that over it. There's a lot of that over and over and over again. So because of that, those realities, it's easier to see like the cracks in a relationship that make it unfounded. So again, this is probably a 3.25 star show, but most of what there is to talk about this show is what happens in it, as opposed to whether it's constructed well or not. Because I mean, it's a dating show. This is a review podcast. It's a 3.25 star show, maybe 3 stars. It's going to be one or the other. You'll see in the show notes, but it's just a dating show. But the compelling parts about it are what it brings up for us to talk about. So with all of that being said, SK ends up saying no to Raven at the altar, which I think was the 100% right decision. And I really hope for once on this show that a lot more people say no at the altar than say yes, because I just think that they just weren't matched well this season. And for those of you following along, hey, you can come find me. We can talk about it more. But I feel pretty confident in saying that. But if you're interested in hearing more and hearing me discuss this further, again, Patreon exclusive episode will be part 2, where I'll discuss all the rest of the resolutions of the rest of the couples. We'll go into it deeper. We'll talk about what that means. I mean, well, it'll just be me. Well, I'll talk about what that means, how I feel about it, all of that. But come on over to Patreon and we can figure that out. And the link again for that will be in the show notes. But with that, Leaving the Theater is a production of OhitsBigRon Studios. Thomas Tyra of Bias Studios mixes the show. Thank you, Tom. Show art from Heather Wilder. Theme music by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. To find out more information about Love is Blind, check out our show notes for details. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at OhitsBigRon. That's at OhitsBigRon. You can find out more about this show and other OhitsBigRon Studios shows by following us on Instagram at OhitsBigRon Studios and on Twitter at OhitsBigRonStew. That's STEW. Leaving the Theater will be back soon, but until then, I'll be here on the couch